Chapter 8, Part 2 of the Deluge, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by K. Hand. The Deluge, Volume 1 by Henryk Sienkiewicz. Translated by Jeremiah Curtin. Chapter 8, Part 2. The Cossacks answered with shots, but they had not time to reload. The throng of nobles rushed against the gate, which soon fell before the pressure of armed men. A struggle began to rage in the yard, among the wagons, horses, and bags. The powerful Butryms, the fiercest in hand-to-hand conflict and the most envenomed against Kmita, advanced in line. They went like a herd of stags bursting through a growth of young trees, breaking, trampling, destroying, and cutting wildly. After them rolled the Domasheviches and the Gostyeviches. Kmita's Cossacks defended themselves manfully from behind the wagons and packs. They began to fire too from all the windows of the house and from the roof, but rarely, for the trampled torches were quenched, and it was difficult to distinguish their own from the enemy. After a while the Cossacks were pushed from the yard and the house to the stables. Cries for quarter were heard. The nobles had triumphed. But when they were alone in the yard, fire from the house increased at once. All the windows were bristling with muskets, and a storm of bullets began to fall on the yard. The greater part of the Cossacks had taken refuge in the house. "To the doors!" cried Volodyovski. In fact, the discharges from the windows and from the roof could not injure those at the very walls. The position, however, of the besiegers was difficult. They could not think of storming the windows, for fire would greet them straight in the face. Volodyovski therefore commanded to hew down the doors. But that was not easy, for they were bolts rather than doors, made of oak pieces fixed crosswards and fastened with many gigantic nails, on the strong heads of which axes were dented without breaking the doors. The most powerful men pushed then from time to time with their shoulders, but in vain. Behind the doors were iron bars, and besides they were supported inside by props. But the Butryms hewed with rage. At the doors of the kitchen, leading also to the storehouse, the Domasheviches and Gashtovts were storming. After vain efforts of an hour the men at the axes were relieved. Some cross pieces had fallen, but in place of them appeared gun barrels. Shots sounded again. 2 Butryms fell to the ground with pierced breasts. The others, instead of being put to disorder, hewed still more savagely. By command of Volodyovski the openings were stopped with bundles of coats. Now in the direction of the road new shouts were heard from the Stakans, who had come to the aid of their brethren, and following them were armed peasants from Vodokty. The arrival of these reinforcements had evidently disturbed the besiege, for straightway a voice behind the door called loudly, "Stop there! Do not hew! Listen! Stop, 100 devils take you! Let us talk." Volodyovski gave orders to stop the work and asked, "Who is speaking?" "The banneret of Orsha, Kmita. And with whom am I speaking?" "Colonel Michael Volodyovski." "With the forehead?" answered the voice from behind the door. "There is no time for greetings. What is your wish?" "It would be more proper for me to ask what you want. You do not know me, nor I you. Why attack me?" "Traitor!" cried Volodyovski. "With me are the men of Lauda who have returned from the war, and they have accounts with you for robbery, for bloodshed without cause, and for the lady whom you have carried away. But do you know what raptus puellae means? You must yield your life." A moment of silence followed. "You would not call me traitor a second time," said Kmita, "were it not for the door between us." "Open it then, I do not hinder." "More than one dog from Lauda will cover himself with his legs before it is open. You will not take me alive." "Then we will drag you out dead, by the hair. All one to us." "Listen with care, note what I tell you. If you do not let us go, I have a barrel of powder here, and the match is burning already. I'll blow up the house, all who are in it with myself, so help me God. Come now and take me." This time a still longer silence followed. Volodyovski sought an answer in vain. The nobles began to look at one another in fear. There was so much wild energy in the words of Kmita that all believed his threat. The whole victory might be turned into dust by one spark, and Panna Billevich lost forever. "For God's sake," muttered one of the Butryms, "he is a madman, he is ready to do what he says." Suddenly a happy thought came to Volodyovski, as it seemed to him. "There is another way!" cried he. "Meet me, traitor, with a sabre. If you put me down, you will go away in freedom." For a time there was no answer. The hearts of the Lauda men beat unquietly. "With a sabre?" asked Kmita at length. "Can that be?" "If you are not afraid, it will be." "The word of a cavalier that I shall go away in freedom?" "The word " "Impossible!" cried a number of voices among the Butryms. "Quiet, 100 devils!" roared Volodyovski. "If not, then let him blow you up with himself." The Butryms were silent. After a while one of them said, "Let it be as you wish." "Well, what is the matter there?" asked Kmita, derisively. "Do the gray coats agree?" "Yes, and they will take oath on their swords if you wish." "Let them take oath." "Come together, gentlemen, come together!" cried Volodyovski to the nobles who were standing under the walls and surrounding the whole house. After a while all collected at the main door, and soon the news that Kmita wanted to blow himself up with powder spread on every side. They were as if petrified with terror. Meanwhile Volodyovski raised his voice and said amid silence like that of the grave, "I take you all present here to witness that I have challenged Pan Kmita, the banneret of Orsha, to a duel, and I have promised that if he puts me down he shall go hence in freedom without obstacle from you. To this you must swear on your sword hilts, in the name of God and the Holy Cross." "But wait!" cried Kmita. "In freedom with all my men, and I take the lady with me." "The lady will remain here," answered Volodyovski, "and the men will go as prisoners to the nobles." "That cannot be." "Then blow yourself up with powder. We have already mourned for her; as to the men, ask them what they prefer." Silence followed. "Let it be so," said Kmita, after a time. "If I do not take her to day, I will in a month. You will not hide her under the ground. Take the oath." "Take the oath," repeated Volodyovski. "We swear by the Most High God and the Holy Cross, Amen." "Well, come out, come out!" cried Volodyovski. "You are in a hurry to the other world?" "No matter, no matter; only come out quickly." The iron bars holding the door on the inside began to groan. Volodyovski pushed back, and with him the nobles, to make room. Soon the door opened, and in it appeared Pan Andrei, tall, straight as a poplar. The dawn was already coming, and the first pale light of day fell on his daring, knightly, and youthful face. He stopped in the door, looked boldly on the crowd of nobles, and said, "I have trusted in you. God knows whether I have done well, but let that go. Who here is Pan Volodyovski?" The little colonel stepped forward. "I am," answered he. "Oh, you are not like a giant," said Kmita, with sarcastic reference to Volodyovski's stature. "I expected to find a more considerable figure, though I must confess you are evidently a soldier of experience." "I cannot say the same of you, for you have neglected sentries. If you are the same at the sabre as at command, I shall not have work." "Where shall we fight?" asked Kmita, quickly. "Here. The yard is as level as a table." "Agreed. Prepare for death." "Are you so sure?" "It is clear that you have never been in Orsha, since you doubt. Not only am I sure, but I am sorry, for I have heard of you as a splendid soldier. Therefore I say for the last time, let me go. We do not know each other; why should we stand the one in the way of the other? Why attack me? The maiden is mine by the will, as well as this property, and God knows I am only seeking my own. It is true that I cut down the nobles in Montovieci, but let God decide who committed the first wrong. Whether my officers were men of violence or not, we need not discuss. It is enough that they did no harm to any one here, and they were slaughtered to the last man because they wanted to dance with girls in a public house. Well, let blood answer blood. After that my soldiers were cut to pieces. I swear by the wounds of God that I came to these parts without evil intent, and how was I received? But let wrong balance wrong. I will still add from my own and make losses good in neighbor fashion. I prefer that to another way." "And what kind of people have you here? Where did you get these assistants?" asked Volodyovski. "Where I got them, I got them. I did not bring them against the country, but to obtain my own rights." "Is that the kind of man you are? So for private affairs you have joined the enemy. And with what have you paid him for this service, if not with treason? No, brother, I should not hinder you from coming to terms with the nobles, but to call in the enemy is another thing. You will not creep out. Stand up now, stand up, or I shall say that you are a coward, though you give yourself out as a master from Orsha." "You would have it," said Kmita, taking position. But Volodyovski did not hurry, and not taking his sabre out yet, he looked around on the sky. Day was already coming in the east. The first golden and azure strips were extended in a belt of light, but in the yard it was still gloomy enough, and just in front of the house complete darkness reigned. "The day begins well," said Volodyovski, "but the sun will not rise soon. Perhaps you would wish to have light?" "It is all one to me." "Gentlemen," cried Volodyovski, turning to the noble, Go for some straw and for torches. It will be clearer for us in this Orsha dance." The nobles, to whom this humorous tone of the young colonel gave wonderful consolation, rushed quickly to the kitchen. Some of them fell to collecting the torches trampled at the time of the battle, and in a little while nearly 50 red flames were gleaming in the semi-darkness of the early morning. Volodyovski showed them with his saber to Kmita. "Look, a regular funeral procession!" And Kmita answered at once: "They are burying a colonel, so there must be a parade." "You are a dragon." Meanwhile the nobles formed in silence a circle around the knights, and raised the burning torches aloft; behind them others took their places, curious and disquieted. In the center the opponents measured each other with their eyes. A grim silence began; only burned coals fell with a crackle to the ground. Volodyovski was as lively as a goldfinch on a bright morning. "Begin," said Kmita. The first clash raised an echo in the heart of every onlooker. Volodyovski struck as if unwillingly. Kmita warded and struck in his turn. Volodyovski warded. The dry clash grew more rapid. All held breath. Kmita attacked with fury. Volodyovski put his left hand behind his back and stood quietly, making very careless, slight, almost imperceptible movements. It seemed that he wished merely to defend himself, and at the same time spare his opponent. Sometimes he pushed a short step backward; again he advanced. Apparently he was studying the skill of Kmita. Kmita was growing heated. Volodyovski was cool as a master testing his pupil, and all the time calmer and calmer. At last, to the great surprise of the nobles, he said, "Now let us talk. It will not last long. Aha! Is that the Orsha method? 'Tis clear that you must have threshed peas there, for you strike like a man with a flail. Terrible blows! Are they really the best in Orsha? That thrust is in fashion only among tribunal police. This is from Courland, good to chase dogs with. Look to the end of your sabre. Don't bend your hand so, for see what will happen. Raise your sabre." Volodyovski pronounced the last words with emphasis; at the same time he described a half circle, drew the hand and sabre toward him, and before the spectators understood what "raise" meant, Kmita's sabre, like a needle pulled from a thread, flew above Volodyovski's head and fell behind his shoulders. Then he said, "That is called shelling a sabre." Kmita stood pale, wild-eyed, staggering, astonished no less than the nobles of Lauda. The little colonel pushed to one side and repeated again, "Take your sabre." For a time it seemed as if Kmita would rush at him with naked hands. He was just ready for the spring, when Volodyovski put his hilt to his own breast, presenting the point. Kmita rushed to take his own sabre, and fell with it again on his terrible opponent. A loud murmur rose from the circle of spectators, and the ring grew closer and closer. Kmita's Cossacks thrust their heads between the shoulders of the nobles, as if they had lived all their lives in the best understanding with them. Involuntarily shouts were wrested from the mouths of the onlookers; at times an outburst of unrestrained, nervous laughter was heard. All acknowledged a master of masters. Volodyovski amused himself cruelly like a cat with a mouse, and seemed to work more and more carelessly with the sabre. He took his left hand from behind his back and thrust it into his trousers pocket. Kmita was foaming at the mouth, panting heavily. At last hoarse words came from his throat through his set lips. "Finish! Spare the shame!" "Very well," replied Volodyovski. A short, terrible whistle was heard, then a smothered cry. At the same moment Kmita threw open his arms, his sabre dropped to the ground, and he fell on his face at the feet of the colonel. "He lives!" said Volodyovski. "He has not fallen on his back." And doubling the skirt of Kmita's coat, he began to wipe his sabre. The nobles shouted with one voice, and in those shouts thundered with increasing clearness, "Finish the traitor! Finish him! Cut him to pieces!" A number of Butryms ran up with drawn sabres. Suddenly something wonderful happened, and one would have said that little Volodyovski had grown tall before their eyes. The sabre of the nearest Butrym flew out of his hand after Kmita's, as if a whirlwind had caught it, and Volodyovski shouted with flashing eyes, "Stand back! Stand back! He is mine now, not yours. Be off!" All were silent, fearing the anger of that man, and he said, "I want no shambles here. As nobles you should understand knightly customs, and not slaughter the wounded. Enemies do not do that. And how could a man in a duel kill his prostrate opponent?" "He is a traitor," muttered one of the Butryms. "It is right to kill such a man." "If he is a traitor he should be given to the hetman, to suffer punishment, and serve as an example to others. But as I have said, he is mine now, not yours. If he recovers you will be free to get your rights before a court, and it will be easier to obtain satisfaction from a living than a dead man. Who here knows how to dress wounds?" "Krysh Domashevich. He has attended to all in Lauda for years." Let him dress the man at once, then take him to bed, and I will go to console the ill-fated lady." So saying, Volodyovski put his sabre into the scabbard. The nobles began to seize and bind Kmita's men, who henceforth were to plough land in the villages. They surrendered without resistance; only a few who had escaped through the rear windows of the house ran toward the ponds, but they fell into the hands of the Stakyans who were stationed there. At the same time the nobles fell to plundering the wagons, in which they found quite a plentiful booty. Some of them gave advice to sack the house, but they feared Pan Volodyovski, and perhaps the presence of Panna Billevich restrained the most daring. Their own killed, among whom were 3 Butryms and 2 Domasheviches, the nobles put into wagons so as to bury them according to Christian rites. They ordered the peasants to dig a ditch for Kmita's dead behind the garden. Volodyovski in seeking the lady burst through the whole house, and found her at last in the treasure chamber, situated in a corner to which a low and narrow door led from the sleeping room. It was a small chamber, with narrow, strongly barred windows, built in a square, and with such mighty walls that Volodyovski saw at once that even if Kmita had blown up the house with powder, that room would have surely remained unharmed. This gave him a better opinion of Kmita. The lady was sitting on a chest not far from the door, with her head drooping, and her face almost hidden by her hair. She did not raise it when she heard the knight coming. She thought beyond doubt that it was Kmita himself or some one of his people. Pan Volodyovski stood in the door, coughed once, a second time, and seeing no result from that, said, "My lady, you are free." From under the drooping hair blue eyes looked at the knight, and then a comely face appeared, though pale and as it were not conscious. Volodyovski was hoping for thanks, an outburst of gladness, but the lady sat motionless, distraught, and merely looked at him. Therefore the knight spoke again. "Come to yourself, my lady. God has regarded innocence. You are free, and can return to Vodokty." This time there was more consciousness in the look of Panna Billevich. She rose from the chest, shook back her hair, and asked, "Who are you?" "Michael Volodyovski, colonel of dragons, with the voevoda of Vilna." "Did I hear a battle? Shots? Tell me." "Yes, we came to save you." She regained her senses completely. "I thank you," said she hurriedly, with a low voice, through which a mortal disquiet was breaking. "But what happened to him?" "To Kmita? Fear not, my lady. He is lying lifeless in the yard, and without praising myself I did it." Volodyovski uttered this with a certain boastfulness, but if he expected admiration he deceived himself terribly. She said not a word, but tottered, and began to seek support behind with her hands. At last she sat heavily on the same chest from which she had risen a moment before. The knight sprang to her quickly. "What is the matter, my lady?" "Nothing, nothing. Wait, permit me. Then is Pan Kmita killed?" "What is Pan Kmita to me?" interrupted Volodyovski. "It is a question here of you." That moment her strength came back, for she rose again, and looking him straight in the eyes, screamed with anger, impatience, and despair, "By the living God, answer! Is he killed?" "Pan Kmita is wounded," answered the astonished Volodyovski. "Is he alive?" "He is alive." "It is well! I thank you." And with step still tottering she moved toward the door. Volodyovski stood for a while moving his mustaches violently and shaking his head; then he muttered to himself, "Does she thank me because Kmita is wounded, or because he is alive?" He followed Olenka, and found her in the adjoining bedroom, standing in the middle of it as if turned to stone. 4 nobles were bearing at that moment Pan Kmita. The first 2, advancing sidewise, appeared in the door, and between them hung toward the floor the pale head of Pan Andrei, with closed eyes and clots of black blood in his hair. "Slowly," said Krysh Domashevich, walking behind, slowly across the threshold. "Some one hold his head, slowly." "With what can we hold it when our hands are full?" answered those in front. At that moment Panna Aleksandra approached them, pale as was Kmita himself, and placed both hands under his lifeless head. "This is the lady," said Krysh Domashevich. "It is I. Be careful," answered she in a low voice. Volodyovski looked on, and his mustaches quivered fearfully. Meanwhile they placed Kmita on the bed. Krysh Domashevich began to wash his head with water; then he fixed a plaster previously prepared to the wound, and said, "Now let him lie quietly. Oh, that's an iron head not to burst from such a blow. He may recover, for he is young, but he got it hard." Then he turned to Olenka. "Let me wash your hands. Here is water. A kind heart is in you that you were not afraid to put blood on yourself for that man." Speaking thus he wiped her palms with a cloth, but she grew pale and changed in the eyes. Volodyovski sprang to her again. "There is nothing for you here, my lady. You have shown Christian charity to an enemy. Return home." And he offered her his arm. She, however, did not look at him, but turning to Krysh Domashevich, said, "Pan Kryshtof, conduct me." Both went out, and Volodyovski followed them. In the yard the nobles began to shout at sight of her and cry "Vivat!" But she went forward, pale, staggering, with compressed lips and with fire in her eyes. "Long life to our lady! Long life to our colonel!" cried powerful voices. An hour later Volodyovski returned at the head of the Lauda men toward the villages. The sun had risen already. The early morning in the world was gladsome, a real spring morning. The Lauda men clattered forward in a formless crowd along the highway, discussing the events of the night and praising Volodyovski to the skies; but he rode on thoughtful and silent. Those eyes looking from behind the dishevelled hair did not leave his mind, nor that slender form, imposing though bent by grief and pain. "It is a marvel what a wonder she is," he said to himself, "a real princess. I have saved her honor and surely her life, for though the powder would not have blown up the treasure room she would have died of pure fright. She ought to be grateful. But who can understand a fair head? She looked on me as on some serving lad, I know not whether from haughtiness or perplexity." Chapter 9